most altered states of consciousness are actually just deep connection to yourself. And I do truly believe that at our core, most humans, all humans are innately kind and loving and compassionate. And when you're able to connect with that so deeply through these other modalities, what it really teaches you, in my opinion, is like, once you've felt what that really truly feels like in your core, it's so easier to drop into that state without the meditation or the breath work or psychedelic. It just becomes something that you felt it, and if you feel it a couple of times, you know and you trust that that's your core, and it's just really easy to almost beeline into that state of like love and compassion and bliss and kindness, the things that truly do make up the core of what a human being is.
You're listening to A New Way of Living with Dan Voss, inspiring you to a new life of breathwork, cold therapy, nature, and plant medicine. In this week's episode, my guest is Brittany Lillegard. Brittany is a breathwork facilitator, yoga and meditation teacher, and microdosing coach at Microdosing Institute. Over a decade ago, she started exploring the benefits of meditation and breathwork as a way to recover from an intense burnout and severe depression. Additionally, she experienced a transformative psychedelic journey, which was legal and guided by a therapist, that helped ease her depression for the first time in her adult life. To better integrate the profound lessons from this high-dose experience and manage her mental health, she started exploring microdosing. Combining microdosing with breathwork, meditation, and other personal development practices has allowed her to healthily explore, express, and release her emotions, including anger, grief, and sadness. As a result, she gained mental stability, a deep connection with her intuition, and a robust immune system. Brittany, welcome to A New Way of Living podcast.
Thanks, Dan. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm so happy I finally got through your bio. For everyone that's listening, it took me like 3 tries to get through that. Fumbled a few times on a few different tongue twisters. And I love that you brought us right into a breathwork session just before recording that bio for the 3rd time. And that really helped, like just helping me. Yeah, it's what you do. It helped me kind of just relax a little bit and reset. And it definitely got me through that bio. I don't know why I had a hard time saying whatever that phrase was.
Yeah, I think it's because it's Wednesday afternoon, middle of the week. Words are hard.
Yeah. Right? Well, I'm really happy and excited for this conversation. We have become internet friends, I think originally on Clubhouse, and then over time on Instagram. And I'm just excited that we have this opportunity to speak today. And, obviously going through your bio, there are so many things that we have in common, from breathwork and meditation and yoga and microdosing. I'm just really excited to have this conversation today. So
yeah, likewise.
I can get right into it. Yeah. I'd love to start with the idea of altered state of consciousness. We've talked about meditation and breathwork and Wim Hof Method and cold exposure. You're also training to become a Wim Hof Method instructor, which it sounds like that's going to be completed in the next few weeks here, as well as plant medicine and microdosing. So I guess my first question is, what has the idea of altered state of consciousness, whether that's through meditation or breathwork or microdosing or cold exposure, what has altered states of consciousness done for you in your life, and how have you integrated that into your life through all those different methods that I just talked about?
Yeah, well, gosh, that's such a big question to start with, but it's one that I'm really excited to talk about. It's really interesting because a lot of times, when people are talking about altered states of consciousness, there's this focus on the word altered in the sense that it's different from normal. But for me, I actually feel like most of the altered states of consciousness that I have experienced have actually brought me closer to myself. It's just like this deep dive bomb straight into the center core of what I actually am, who I am, the connection that exists between me and everything in the universe. So I kind of don't like the term so much, because instead of an altered state of consciousness, I actually consider it to be a state of just being yourself, like who exactly you are. And in that sense, I almost consider our day-to-day life, the reality that we're living in, to be more of the altered state. So that's sort of what I would start with. It's just really allowed me to be more of me.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way of looking at it. And I think that's why I enjoy meditation, or really all of the different methods that we've talked about, whether it's breath work or meditation. The reason why I said meditation first was because that was like the first thing that I incorporated into my life before breath work, before cold exposure, before microdosing, was meditation several years ago. And it, for me, it's like what you had described, how you described it, in terms of finding your true self and being your true self. That was literally life-changing for me when I could meditate and then see those benefits and feel those benefits throughout my day, throughout my week, whether it was at work or in relationships or stressful situations. It really helps you slow down and just take a quick pause instead of just like running through life, which we all do, right? The rat race of life, and just go, 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 go. And then you just don't even have a moment to process what's going on and who you are and what you want out of life. So for me, that's what that has brought me. And I think that's a really great way of saying it. It's not really an altered state. It's more of a way of being who we are. So I love that.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you mentioned. I know you're currently living in Chicago. I lived in Chicago for 10 years for the bulk of my 20s. And everything was so fast-paced during that period of my life that I was frequently taking action without feeling those actions, without even understanding the actions that I was taking. It literally was just doing for the sake of moving forward and frequently up, as we so often chase in our Western lifestyle. And that go, go, go fast-pacedness without ever taking time to sit down and reflect and to be with myself is what ultimately led me to have, burnout, really severe depression, panic attacks. And similarly, meditation was sort of the first experience that I ever had with what I would consider an altered state of consciousness. And it also was really game-changing for me.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, what was like the first of those that you added into your lifestyle? I think for a lot of people that meditation is that starting point for them. And then they come across something like breath work and they're like, wow, this can be used in this way. So can you tell us a little bit more about, I guess, that trajectory for you? Because you have such a robust skill set of, breath work and meditation, yoga, now getting into things like Wim Hof and cold exposure. Can you kind of give us that, like, the timeline of how and why and where in your life that you incorporated each of those elements?
Yeah. So, my story actually with all of this starts with my first ever panic attack. And at the time I was working as a personal trainer in Chicago. I had quite a successful book of business. I really loved what I was doing. I thought at the time I also was the epitome of health. I was coaching other people to be super healthy. I thought I had my health super dialed in. But I also was completely ignoring sort of the soul side of life and the emotional side of life. And that really just caught up to me. And I remember one day in the locker room at the gym I was working at, just being hit with this panic attack. And at the time I didn't know that's what it was. But what I did know is I couldn't breathe. and I felt like I was dying. And it was absolutely the most terrifying thing that I had experienced at that point in my life. It literally felt like I was dying. But the key part of that experience was that my breath was taken away from me. I couldn't breathe. And during the time, I was really focused on coaching kettlebells. And it was about a week or two later, after this panic attack, I was at a conference with a bunch of other people in the kettlebell world, and one of my mentors made a comment that's quite well accepted in the movement world, and that's, if you can't breathe in a position, you haven't earned that position yet, or you don't belong in that position. So if you're in a really deep squat and for whatever reason you can't breathe there, you probably need to back it off and do some regressions of that movement to slowly work your way up. But when he said it, it really just hit me like a bag of bricks. It literally, if you can't breathe there, you don't belong there. And literally a week or two before, my breath had been taken away from me, and it was in the context outside of movement. But it really made me understand that the lifestyle that I had been chasing, and this fast-pacedness and the go-go-go-ness and the not ever giving myself time to just be with myself, I didn't belong there. So that really put me on this trajectory of wanting to learn more about the breath. I became really obsessed and fascinated. Why would my breath be taken away from me? And how can I prevent this from happening again? But also, what is my breath trying to tell me? And it was trying to tell me that my lifestyle was not healthy for me, despite feeling like it was. So that sort of started me on this crazy idea. I've been hosting couch surfers in my tiny studio in Chicago, and one of them was on a year-long backpacking trip around this exact same time. And I was just kind of like, why can't I do that? Why can't I actually just travel the world? I hadn't had a vacation that was longer than a week ever in my life. So I decided that 6 months from that point, I was going to sell everything that I owned. I was going to rent out my condo, and I booked a one-way flight to Australia. I didn't know what was going to happen after that. I didn't know how long I was going to be gone. I didn't know how long I was going to be traveling. But that just sort of started me on this path of deeper exploration and giving myself time to really learn about myself and slow down. And then from there, I started exploring more meditation and breathwork. I did my yoga teacher training. I moved to the Netherlands, which is really where my first introduction to the Wim Hof Method was. But really, it was that first panic attack and my mentor saying, if you can't breathe there, you don't belong there.
Yeah, I love that saying, or that idea of paying attention to your breath. And it gives us signals, right? It's giving us messages, whether that be a situation that gives you, makes you nervous or a little uncomfortable. And that can certainly be okay. If you're a little out of breath because you're nervous for something, that doesn't always mean it's a bad thing. But there's other situations where it might take your breath away, and you have to really pay attention to that and really check in and say, why is this happening? And where should I be if this means that I'm not meant to be right here, right now? It's a really beautiful tool to have, to pay attention to your breath and to connect to that. It really can actually change people's lives when you look at it in that way and use it as a tool. So I love that framework.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to we can kind of get into, because you talked about some different things there with your trip to Australia, and we can get into that maybe in a little bit with that transient lifestyle, because I feel like you've done such a good job with that. But I want to make sure we cover some of these other topics with really loud motorcycle that's going by right now. Did we talk about Chicago being a little fast-paced?
Yeah, we definitely did.
Yeah. With breathwork, since we're on the topic of breathing, can you tell us a little bit more about how you've incorporated that throughout your life, whether it's just personally or, now you're obviously facilitating Tell us more about how that came to be and how you like to use your breath for overall better health, and how it's making an impact, in your life, and then also like the lives of other people that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's really cool about the breath is that for the most part, our breath works top down. So what I mean by that is your brain is taking in all of this information about what's going on in your environment, and then your breath is responding to how your brain perceives your environment. So it's not uncommon for you to be able to just hear the way someone's breathing and be able to tell if they're happy, excited, sad, nervous, and you may not recognize that that's how you know that those emotions are being experienced by someone. But our breath, it doesn't lie. It responds very, very well to whatever's going on inside. So that's one of the first and I think most amazing things about your breath is that if you can start to learn what your breath is telling you, those little messages, you can really start to understand how your brain is perceiving the environment around you. And once you have that level of awareness, if you want to change something about the environment around you, it's easier to do that because you have these cues where you can really, truly understand how your body is responding to all of the stimulus that is in your space. But what's equally cool about the breath is generally, it's an automatic function. We breathe without thinking about it. But out of all of the automatic functions in our body, we can also consciously control our breath. And it works two ways. So now if you understand those breathing patterns, if you understand what type of breathing pattern someone has when they're feeling calm, happy, or excited, or when they're feeling sad or angry, you can replicate those. You can consciously choose to take on one of those breath patterns. And then your brain starts to say, wait a minute, this breathing pattern is not what I expected, but it's telling me that this person is calm. And then your brain says, we must be calm. And so then it starts to send signals back into the rest of your body saying, the breath pattern's calm, body. So we're going to turn on all of the calm functions in our body. Or similarly, if I were to sit here and start to hyperventilate, I could literally start sending signals up to my brain that I'm overly excited, that I'm nervous or I'm anxious about something. And then my brain's going to say, ooh, our breath is nervous and anxious, so I'm going to turn on our nervous and anxious signals throughout the body. So it's this really nice feedback loop that generally is top down. When you start to learn what that top down signals are, you can sort of hack into your breath from the opposite direction and really craft the type of emotional environment that you want to have. So that was a really long-winded explanation for that, but
what would be some ways that we can tap into that to, like, let's say we're paying attention to our breath, whether that's starting to hyperventilate a little bit, or you can tell you're like short on breath, you're nervous, or whatever that emotion may be. Are there certain breathing techniques or methods that we can use to kind of bring us into that state that we would ideally want to be in?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things here. So I think first and foremost, the practice that I recommend to most people when they're starting to get acquainted with their breath and breath work is actually just a very simple breath awareness meditation. That's really, in my opinion, where it starts. If you don't have awareness of how your breath operates in your body, you can do all of the breath work in the world, but it's not going to be as effective for you if you truly don't have a baseline relationship with your breath to start. So the first style of meditation that really resonated with me was a breath awareness meditation. And it's quite simple. It's literally just spending space meditating on your breath. taking time to feel where your breath is in your body, taking time to notice how your breath feels on your upper lip, in your nostrils. Does it feel different on the left side or the right side? How does it feel in your throat, your chest, your body? Just getting really curious about it, and even starting to ask yourself questions about it. If I breathe into my left hip, how does that feel? Can I even feel myself directing my breath into my left hip? Now, if I breathe into my right hip, does it feel different? If I breathe into my belly or my chest, what kind of emotions start to come up for me? And just starting to cultivate this curiosity around your breath, hands down, is step number one. It doesn't have to be a crazy in-depth practice. You can literally do it 1 minute a day to start. And you may even notice that when you first start something like this, if you've not built a relationship with your breath, it may be hard to even feel any of this. It may be hard for someone to even feel their breath in their nostrils when they first start a breath awareness practice. But the more you start to just focus on your breath and how it feels in your body and how it responds to the questions that you're asking it, that in and of itself is life-changing. But that's really the foundation that you need to start before you start jumping into, in my opinion, breathwork practices, which are advanced. Even the most simple breathwork practices, you'll get so much more out of them if you just learn how to feel where your breath is in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why I love, for me, like the beginning of structured breath work for me was the Wim Hof Method. And yes, that is advanced, and it can be pretty complex on a physiological level, but it was also a really good starting point for me to just pay attention to the breath. And for those that are familiar with Wim Hof Method in terms of like what's actually happening there, the 30 to 40 deep breaths, you wanted to, breathe in like a wave, into your belly, up into your chest, over your head. Like it's visualizing a wave there. That practice for me allowed me to pay attention to my breath and connect with my breath in a different way than I've ever had before. And from there, then I throughout my day just pay attention to it a little bit more and just slow things down. And then to your point, like it can be it's just really simple methods in terms of just breathe in for 5 seconds and exhale for 5. Like just literally slowing down your breath can have so much impact. It's really fascinating stuff. So on that note, with Wim Hof Method, do you want to share a little bit more about that journey for you? I think you maybe just mentioned earlier on how you were first introduced to Wim Hof Method, but maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit more, how it was introduced into your life, what it has done for you, and then maybe if you want to share too on your journey of becoming an instructor and the different coursework that is involved there. I'd love to hear more about your Wim Hof story.
Yeah, so I really started learning more about breath work when I did my yoga teacher training. Pranayama is a really important part, and I would say even more important than asana or movements in a yoga practice. And that definitely deepened my continued obsession with learning about the breath and breath work. But shortly after I lived in India for a bit teaching yoga as well, I moved to the Netherlands. So I already had quite a deep foundation of an understanding of breath work and how it works in the body. And then when I moved to the Netherlands, I was actually really fortunate there to do a legal and guided therapeutic psychedelic session. There are certain psychedelics that are legal in the Netherlands. And during that session, one of the biggest things that came up for me was how much I could play with my breath and how much my breath connected me to my body, but not just my body, but to everything around me, to everything in the universe. And there was this very, very, very clear moment during this psychedelic session when I was actually like literally just having so much fun playing with my breath and sending it in parts of my body and just really exploring my body through my breath, where it was so insanely clear to me that my purpose was to give that gift to other people, to teach them how to explore and build a deeper connection to themselves and to nature through their breath. And after that psychedelic session as well, one of the really, really, really important things about a psychedelic experience or any altered state of consciousness really is to integrate the experience. So to take these insights that you've learned in that experience, but actually take action on them in your life afterwards. And this is something that's really important even in breathwork. You can get a lot of benefit and learnings and insights out of meditation, breathwork, psychedelic experiences, but if you're not actually taking action to integrate them into your life, are they really that valuable? So during my integration process, I started exploring breathwork as a tool to integrate the insights that I had garnered from this psychedelic experience. And being in the Netherlands, this is where Wim Hof is from. It's quite a popular modality there. Every yoga school has, a couple of Wim Hof sessions a week as well. It's hard to not come across the method there or have easy access to instruction. But I also was super fortunate to work a little bit briefly with Casper van der Molen. He was one of the original Wim Hof instructors years ago, really great guy. And that's when I really started learning how the Wim Hof method can also induce an altered state of consciousness and how that state could help me integrate my psychedelic experience. So that was, again, a little bit of a long-winded description there. But
no, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, my urge to go deeper with breathwork was in a response to learn more about this really deep altered state of consciousness that I had experienced.
Yeah. So I've been to, I think two different Wim Hof workshops. My first one was about a year ago, September of 2020. And that for me, besides meditation, that was like the first time I experienced an altered state of consciousness in that way. And instantly it was just like, this is it. This is amazing. Like the fact that I can do this naturally and I can learn how to do this on my own. And of course, like just the Wim Hof Method organization provides so many opportunities and resources, whether that's through workshops or the Wim Hof app or YouTube videos, or just having conversations with other instructors. Like for me, I walked away from that like, this is awesome. I can now explore this whole new world of breath work and cold exposure. But what I'm getting at is that the biggest takeaway for me was that altered state where it was done naturally through the breath. And the fact that I could spend 5 to 10 minutes after reaching that state in just pure bliss and joy and peace and love. And I remember turning to the person that was next to me, because the workshop, I think there was about 15 or so people. And I remember after that, the breath work that we had done, which was about I think we did 3 or 4 rounds of the deep breathing and retention and all of that. And for me, I remember just like I said, it was very blissful, but my whole body would just like went kind of numb, like my arms, my chest, everything, in a good way, like just in a very tingly, like relaxed way. And then opening my eyes after all of that session, looking around at people. And I remember just turning to the person next to me and like kind of striking up a small conversation around how we were feeling. And I said to him, like, this has the power to change the world. Like, imagine if everybody had access to this and we all incorporated it into our life, the breath work and the cold exposure, but especially the breathing. People can literally feel happier and more and joyful and more patient and kinder, more compassionate and more loving and more peaceful. And if we had a world of people that did that on a daily basis, what a beautiful world that would be. Like, it literally would change the world. And that's just one example, is the breath work. I mean, we could say the same thing about cold exposure and psychedelics in general, when used properly and safely. But yeah, it's powerful stuff. It really is.
Absolutely. Well, and going back to your original question, what is an altered state of consciousness? Again, in my opinion, most altered states of consciousness are actually just deep connection to yourself. And I do truly believe that at our core, most humans, all humans are innately kind and loving and compassionate. And when you're able to connect with that so deeply through these other modalities, what it really teaches you, in my opinion, is like, once you've felt what that really truly feels like in your core, it's so easier to drop into that state without the meditation or the breath work or psychedelic. It just becomes something that you felt it, and if you feel it a couple of times, you know and you trust that that's your core, and it's just really easy to almost beeline into that state of like love and compassion and bliss and kindness, the things that truly do make up the core of what a human being is, in my opinion.
Yeah, so true. So well said. We've talked a few times here about plant medicine and microdosing. You're working at the Microdosing Institute now in Netherlands, with our friends Jacobine and Hein. Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience, and then just in general, how plant medicine has had an impact in your life, what it's done for you? I have a feeling you'll say, a lot of what we're just talking about in terms of being more patient and more kind, more compassionate, more loving. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. But what has plant medicine done for you, and then maybe tell us a little bit more about how it's been incorporated into your life, what it's done for you, things of that nature.
Yeah, of course. So most of my 20s, all of my 20s, I was living life with pretty deep depression. And there was a period where I also was hitting a huge burnout. I had just opened my own gym. I had just gone through a divorce. I was just not dealing with the emotional and soulful side of life. I was pushing myself way too hard, running myself deep into the ground. And my depression was literally at that point very life-threatening. And it was, during that period that I decided to leave Chicago and become a full-time nomad. But even then, there were a few years of, I was super fortunate to be able to focus on myself and learn a lot about myself during that period. But it really wasn't until my first guided psychedelic session that it really felt like the depression had lifted. And I sort of liken it to, it's like I had been walking around with really poor vision. Like, my depression was this really poor vision that just clouded everything, and I couldn't see through it. Probably couldn't see further than what was right in front of me in my nose. So making a lot of assumptions about the world around me and just feeling very unsafe because I couldn't see the breath around me. And after this first psychedelic session, it was like someone had put glasses on me, and my vision just became super clear. And all of a sudden I could actually see the world and the environment around me. And how powerful is that? I mean, anyone who has dealt with severe depression or anxiety, it's a very lonely thing to battle. It can feel like a very helpless thing to battle. It frequently feels like there's no solution. And to have this single session with plant medicine that allowed me to see clearly for the first time in literally over a decade, it gave me a lot of hope. But again, and I keep going back to this, once you feel what something feels like, it's easier to drop back into that state. So once I could feel what it was like to not be plagued by this fogginess of depression, it doesn't mean that my depression went away immediately, but it became easier and easier for me to drop back into the clarity state every time that fog would sort of overtake me. And microdosing has really helped me maintain that clarity, if you will. It's helped me maintain a lot of the insights that have come out of some of my bigger high dose journeys, as well as breathwork and microdosing both. And for those listening, if you're not familiar with microdosing, it's taking very small, sub-perceptual amounts of psychedelics. You don't get any of the classical psychedelic experiences, no visual distortions, no hallucinations, but it really just allows you to walk through your day with a bit more awareness and a bit more color to things. So yeah, I mean, for me, plant medicines have been absolutely instrumental in managing my mental health and coming to a place to where I feel like I can walk and exist in this world with like joy and happiness, which is not something I could say for well over a decade of my life.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And what's so fascinating to me about plant medicine, and we're seeing this really in the last, I would say, let's say decade, the surgence of so many people like you that are sharing similar experiences and similar stories of lifting that fog, that depression or anxiety or just general difficulties in life that they just don't know how to handle. And I think the way you said it is so well put, in terms of it helps you get into a place where you can be more aware of that state that you may be in, whether that's that fogginess or the depression, and it can help you get over to that other side of more clarity. And like you said, it's not always going to put you into that spot of clarity. You will still maybe be in some of that fogginess, but at least it makes you a little bit more aware. And to me, that's the key part, is awareness, rather than just the opposite of not being aware. And then it's a cycle then, right? It's just like it's like a spinning wheel that you can't get out of, or you don't know how to get out of. And then maybe you have to lean on, prescription drugs or, other methods of coping, right? And that's where people maybe slip into addictions. And for me, that's like the coolest part about all of this, is that it's giving people a tool to make changes in several areas of their life, and do it in a way that, going back to how you described it with that altered state of consciousness, it's bringing you to a spot that is aligning with your true self. And to me, that is the most exciting part of it. And the fact that we're hearing the same or similar story from so many people is really hopeful.
Yeah, absolutely. And
really
just circling back and connecting some of the conversations that we've had today, awareness really is the first step to creating change. And action without awareness is it's hollow oftentimes. So even, again, going back to your question about how do you get started into breath work, just becoming aware of your breath goes so much further than just jumping into breathwork exercises without that awareness. Stepping into any inner work requires a level of awareness in order for you to actually take actions that are aligned and will eventually, bring you into, to use your words, into alignment, to bring you closer to, your true self.
Yeah. What are some things that since working with the Microdosing Institute, what are some of the things that you've been learning recently? Just in general, if there's anything you wanted to share. And then I'd also love to hear a little bit more about having the importance of having a consistent regimen for microdosing. Because some people might just be like, oh, I'll just kind of get started and kind of willy-nilly it and figure it out. But I know there's certain protocols to do it in a more effective way. Can you share a little bit more about that? And then again, if there's anything that you're learning since working with the Microdosing Institute, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Well, working with Microdosing Institute has been absolutely wonderful. We're a super small team. So in terms of learning logistically or skill-wise, I've learned so much working with such a tiny team where we all have to take on and wear many different hats, and oftentimes hats that none of us have worn before. So that's been really nourishing. But also, one of the things that I love so much about the psychedelic space is it tends to be a really heart-driven and compassionate space, which is not really something I've experienced in a lot of other positions before. I have had a few corporate jobs. I've worked for a few large, big box gyms. And even though I've been in the service industry and even in the yoga space for quite a long time, it is very rare to come across a business that's truly, in my opinion, people forward and heart centered and makes decisions always with a compassionate container around that decision making. So that's just been amazing because it's really made me understand and be excited that you can do work, and you can do work that feels good and feels good for helping other people. As far as microdosing is concerned, yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't exist in a lot of spaces. So I'm super grateful and fortunate for this experience. But in terms of microdosing, I mean, one of the biggest things with microdosing, so often people come to us and they want to know the exact right way to microdose. But there is no right way. The beautiful thing about microdosing is that it is a catalyst to increasing your awareness, and paying attention to that extra awareness and those extra little insights that you start to learn about yourself is really the key to crafting a microdosing practice that long-term becomes the most beneficial and nourishing for you. So there are definitely some guidelines for beginners. There's definitely schedules and protocols for beginners that are always the easiest to start with. The Fadiman protocol, which is microdosing for 1 day and taking 2 days off, and doing that for 4 to 6 weeks is generally what's recommended for beginners. But again, if you're just taking your microdose in the morning and taking it on this super regimented schedule, but you're not taking the time to reflect during that process, it becomes a really hollow experience. The magic in microdosing is really using that added awareness to self-reflect on how you feel, how you are interpreting the world around you, how you're interacting with the world around you and your emotions, and then looking at what feels good and doesn't feel good, and then taking steps to get to where you want to go. So that's really the biggest thing that I would say is that, it's other than taking a dose that's too high, that's usually where we start to run into issues. There's not a lot that you can do to screw up a microdosing practice if you're showing up to your microdosing practice with intention and truly tapping into that added awareness that microdosing is giving you.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I mean, I guess it's like anything else that you incorporate into your life, a new practice. When you are just beginning, you're going to approach it a little bit different than when you have more experience, because then at that point you are more back to what we were saying with awareness. Like, you're more aware, you have more practice and experience with it. You're more in tune with how it works and how how you react to that. But for beginning, I think it is really important to be more aware of how it's changing your life, or how it is helping you see things in different ways. So I know, like, journaling is a big thing for people that are into microdosing, whether that's gratitude journaling or just journaling throughout the process, throughout the day, throughout the week. And then maybe revisit that and look back at, what you've written down over the last week or last month and pay attention to those things. I think can be really beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually used to, when I first launched my own wellness brand, I used to teach a lot of journaling workshops. It was sort of the cornerstone workshop of my brand.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I would teach people is consistency in that journaling is more important than what you're actually writing down. A lot of times people get so stuck, and I used to be one of them. I'm very, I majored in math. I tend to be in my head a lot. I'm very rational. I think a lot about a lot. And so when it comes to a journal, there's a blank page in front of you. I would frequently overthink about what was right or wrong about putting down. But really to get the most out of a journaling practice, just having consistency and just allowing yourself to write without judgment is one of the most important things for getting the most out of it. And one of the ways that I would help people with that is I actually have a little journaling format that I follow. I followed it for about 6 years, almost daily for that entire 6 years. And I just do like a quick little physical check-in every morning. And that check-in is like, how did I sleep? What have my energy levels been like? What's my digestion like? And how's my skin been? For a lot of people, those are some really basic things that can tell you a lot about your health. And one of the things that I tell people is, in terms of consistency, you may track those things for months and you may write the exact same thing down. Slept 7 hours last night, went to bed at this time, woke up at this time. And it may feel redundant and get boring, but the second something is off, you will know because you've been so consistent. Wow. And a lot of times you can catch things way faster just because you've been focusing on the boring things for so long. Once it becomes unboring, it's like, hey, wait a minute. That's a little different than usual. And then after that, I just do an emotional check-in, and I don't overthink it. I literally just write a couple of words. How have I been feeling emotionally lately? And then after that, I have a gratitude list. What am I feeling grateful for today? And then if I'm feeling like it, I'll write down an intention for the day, something that I, will use as a guiding post throughout the day. But it's super simple, takes a couple of minutes. So for people who are listening, microdosing or not, if journaling's ever felt overwhelming, that little format, I've had a lot of success with clients using it as well, and it's been really nourishing for me.
I love that idea of showing up every day, or at least every week, being consistent. And even if it feels repetitive, just make sure you're still doing it, because like you said, the second that something is off or like away from your normal routine or the normalcy of whatever it is, then you can be like, okay, that's not normal. What's going on there? And then kind of dissect that a little bit. That's really powerful. And just in terms of like journaling in general, for me, I have done journaling in that way throughout my life, but gratitude journaling more recently has been really impactful for me. Just showing up and to the point of consistency. It may be repetitive, but it puts me into a mindset of obviously being grateful and being thankful for what I have. And when I do that every morning, I notice throughout the day, I'm more thankful. And that puts me in a spot where I'm like not as stressed out about certain things or down about certain things or depressed, because I started the day spending a few minutes reflecting on what I am grateful for. And that to me has been really impactful.
Yeah, it's super powerful. I mean, there's a lot of studies and research on, gratitude mindset and what it does for your overall well-being. So, I know there's quite a few things in my life that I'm really into from a wellness perspective that as of right now, don't have a lot of scientific backing per se. Microdosing even being one of them. The science there is unfortunately quite limited. But when it comes to the gratitude mindset, there's loads of science on how that affects our overall well-being, and it's such a simple thing to do. And it really just, it teaches you just to start looking for the things that are good. And that doesn't mean, I'm also a big fan of being realistic.
Sure.
I think, there's definitely such a thing as toxic positivity. And that mindset is not great in a lot of ways. But there's also nothing wrong with, trying to see the positive things in your life aside from or next to the things that don't feel so positive, and it can really do wonders.
Yeah, 100%. I know you're also very much appreciative of being in nature, and for me, nature has been added into my lifestyle more recently. I mean, I've always enjoyed it, but it was really actually during COVID is when I wanted to be outside more. And I know that was the case for a lot of people, just being sick of stuck inside and not having really anywhere to go. So I know there's been this kind of surgence of people wanting to get back out into nature. And I think some of that for me has been enhanced in terms of that appreciation, has been enhanced from plant medicine, whether that's psychedelics or cannabis even, making me more present and paying attention to my surroundings and appreciating, even if it's like in the park, like the trees, like maybe the wind goes by and it like kind of sways some of the leaves, like just being more present and aware and in the moment and appreciative of the many beautiful things about nature. So that's been kind of my experience more recently. I'd love to hear from you, what has nature done for you and how it's shaped who you are, and then maybe even touch a little bit on like the healing part of it, especially in today's world where we have so much stress and just chaos in many ways. So what has nature done for you in your life?
I mean, I think the easier question to answer would be, what has nature not done?
Oh, yeah.
Similar to you, I did not grow up with a strong relationship with nature. I grew up, in a city. After college, I moved to a city. I definitely spent time outdoors as a kid, but it was not a significant focus or part of my childhood. And then in my 20s, straight to Chicago, and everything was about the very urban lifestyle. And it really, I think my relationship with nature really deepened. I was really fortunate to have an opportunity to live in New Zealand for almost a year, a few years ago. And people in New Zealand, gosh, it's such a beautiful culture, but they're really raised with such a deep respect and reverence for nature. And so witnessing how connected and part of their lifestyle nature is, that was really my first foray into experiencing that for myself as well. As far as what nature means to me, I mean, she is the greatest teacher. She is the greatest gift giver. I think when in doubt, if there's anything that causes confusion or questions in my life, turning to nature always seems to offer solutions, and if not solutions, peace with, peace and acceptance with what is. And what I mean by her teaching and lessons, there's so many beautiful patterns in nature. This is my math brain coming out. But when something works really well, nature repeats it over and over and over and over and over again. And so often we try to work around that or do better. But, nature has had a much longer leg up on the world than we have. And if there's something that works really well and she's been doing it for forever, chances are it's done that way for a reason.
Yeah.
And so just like dropping into the little things that you notice, and just even like with the shifting of the seasons and what that means for the pacing of your life. It sounds really silly, but like summer is always just more energetic and heated, and it's a time for more action. And then as we move into fall, it's a time for really, cleansing and letting go and starting to slow down. And winter's really for like going inward. And that's a very simple example, but it's such a wonderful way to also live your life, making sure that we're not always in this go state, which is how we are in an urban lifestyle. It's not sustainable, and nature shows us that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we have to replicate, the seasons exactly and, be in go mode only during the summer and let go only during the fall. But we can, take that lesson of this cyclical seasons to anything that we do, any project, any big life change, and do it with much more care and nurturing for ourselves if we replicate sort of the lessons that she's already giving us.
Yeah.
So for me, that would be, the simplest answer is she's just such a wonderful teacher.
So true. It's such a wonderful teacher in so many ways. And I love what you said about the different seasons too. That's part of why I love being in a place like Chicago so much, and not for the urban lifestyle or the city part of it necessarily, but more so of the different seasons. Like we have 4 very distinct seasons. Some of them last a little bit longer than others in terms of winter. Seems like winter is like at least 4 or 5 months, maybe 6, and fall is like 2 weeks. But I love how you described those different seasons, and it's a way for us, like you said, like summer is more energy, and fall is a little bit more time of like slowing things down, and winter going inward. I can feel that in each of those months. And it's really a neat thing to have, because some places in the world, they kind of have, similar weather throughout the year. So I'm very appreciative of that aspect. And then, in terms of, nature being a teacher, I think the thing I'm really grasping lately, is that idea of us as humanity. We come from nature. Like we came from the soil. We came from nature. We are nature. And the more we can kind of tap into that and appreciate that, the more we can learn from nature. And it's a really beautiful thing. Did you happen to have a chance to watch Fantastic Fungi on Netflix yet?
Oh my gosh, I watched it I think the day it came
Yeah.
out, and I think I've watched it 10 times with all of my friends. Yeah,
I've watched
it's
it.
a great documentary.
I've watched it at least twice now. I was aware of some of the things that they had discussed in there, but I didn't realize how complex the mycelium network is, and how deep rooted it is in our world and our history, the history of Mother Earth and Mother Nature, and how many things have stemmed from that mycelium network. It's really fascinating. So I definitely encourage anyone listening to go check that out if you haven't already.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really, it's such a beautifully put together documentary, and it really does shed a lot of insight on how connected everything is. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me there is, we have all of these things that we generally consider as separate things, like a tree is separate from the mushroom on the ground, which is separate from the soil, which is separate from the animals in the forest. Like we tend to view things as singular, independent items of each other, when in reality, all of these things are so highly interconnected, and they really can't exist. They've developed to exist or coexist together. And that's also, again, when we're talking about nature being a teacher, connection, being connected to everything, understanding that we're connected to everything. Nature really shows and shares that.
Yeah, I love that word connection. It's something I'm tapping into more lately, is whether that's connecting to nature, right? Like I had talked about, like I'm just more appreciative and aware of my surroundings when I get out into nature and being more present and mindful. So I can feel that connection to certain elements of nature, but then also connecting to myself, whether that is my body, my mind, my emotions, or connecting to other people, to humanity, and seeing other people as equals, as another human being, and not just a stranger, or not an enemy, or not somebody that's below me, but truly as an equal human being, because we are connected. And I think that all stems from nature, from the fact that we are one. And I know that sounds kind of woo-woo, but we are one. We are connected. And once you start seeing that and living that and appreciating it, it's really cool. It's really cool stuff.
Well, and you asked a question that I didn't answer, and that was about the healing powers of nature, and just reflecting on my own journey, living with depression. One of the things I know now is, in the deepest part of my depression, I was as deep into it as I was because I was so severely disconnected from myself.
Yeah.
And connecting with nature has really given me the space to learn how to connect deeper into my own self and my own body. So from that perspective as well, nature has been really healing. And, if you follow me on Instagram, it used to be more regular. Now I call them semi-regular reminders, but, I encourage everyone to take their shoes off more often and actually walk on bare ground.
Yes.
People don't do it. I walk barefoot every day. I walk my dog barefoot. People give me weird looks. I don't care. This is also something I picked up from New Zealand. Like in New Zealand, no one wears shoes. Like you can walk into the bank, the grocery store.
I love that.
Shoes are always optional.
That's awesome.
But there is something so connective about feeling your feet on the earth.
Yep.
And, there is definitely, and the science is loose, but there is some science around, what that grounding actually does when your bare feet are on soil or unsealed concrete or touching water. But really, it's just the feeling. You feel more human, and your feet are so sensitive, and we kill that sensitivity by putting them in shoes all of the time. And even just reconnecting with those sensations in our feet really do make people so much more alive. So almost every day I try to share a reminder on my Instagram for people to just take their shoes off more often. And I love it. I get so many photos of people's feet. It sounds weird, but it's honestly the thing that lights my soul up the most when I open my Instagram, and someone sent me photos of their feet in the dirt. I'm like, yes, right? If this is the mark I leave on the world, I will take it.
Heck yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm with you there. I like to take my socks and shoes off and walk around barefoot, and I'll do the same thing with my dog, or walk into the park, and I get some stares too, but that, to me, that's the concern for me, is when why do we get stares for walking barefoot? Why has it become norm to always be wearing shoes, and now we're the ones that are odd for being barefoot? It's kind of backwards if you really think about it. But I'm with you there. Obviously there's some science, and there's studies being done on the benefits and the healing benefits of grounding and earthing. But even if you don't even pay attention to that, to the actual science of what's being done there, just that feeling of putting your feet onto the ground is really special. It feels, you can literally feel it.
It's
It feels
so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. Yeah. And actually, one of my, because I know I've mentioned, whether the science is there or not there. I love science. I love when science can tell us or confirm suspicions.
Mm-hmm.
But also, one of my mentors, Dr. Perry Nicholson, he owns a company called Stop Chasing Pain. And one of the things that he says a lot, if it works, it works. And, why does it matter if it works?
Mm-hmm.
And at least for me, taking my shoes off and being barefoot makes me feel good.
Yep.
And a lot of the people that I have convinced to join the weirdo club and take their shoes off more often in weird places, it makes them feel good.
Right.
And if it works, doesn't matter why it works. It doesn't. It just... it doesn't. It makes people feel good. And it's such a simple, free, easy thing
Right.
that everyone can do anywhere.
Yeah, 100%. There's a another resource. There's a documentary. I think it's available on YouTube. It's like an hour-long documentary. I think it's just called The Earthing Movie.
Earthing. Yeah.
Something like that. If you just type in on YouTube Earthing Movie, you'll find it. It's about an hour. And they go into all the benefits of it, and they interview different people, and it's a pretty fascinating video that you can check out. There was something...
Yeah, also a great one.
Yeah. There was something you had talked about, I want to elaborate on a little further, is that idea of being disconnected with yourself. And I know so many people that are disconnected with themselves, and I was one of those people. I would say really it's been the last year or so where I feel like I'm making really good strides to connect more with myself. And a lot of that comes from self-care. And then within that self-care is so many of the things that we have been talking about with meditation, yoga, breathwork, cold showers or cold therapy, grounding or earthing, journaling. So for me, that has been a big part of that self-care, but more importantly, connecting with myself and loving myself. Because I don't think I was doing that. Actually, I know I was not doing that before. Truly loving myself. And one other thing too is movement, exercise or general movement, whether that's walking, running, hiking, swimming. That has been such a big part of my life, is that self-care. So on that note, what has movement done for you, and what are some different ways you like to incorporate movement into your life?
Gosh, this might be the most loaded question you've asked me, actually. So I first got into the health and wellness space as a personal trainer a little over 10 years ago. And I think I've explored movement in every way, shape, or form, every modality, every philosophy around movements, movement as exercise, movement as a health tool, movement as self-care, movement as weight loss. And that's really... that exploration has been really fun. But movement to me these days, it's a non-negotiable, and it's play time.
Yep.
I'm always a big fan of learning rules to help you understand something. But I think for most things, there comes a time and place that once you know the rules, it's time to break them so that you can really create and define what something means for yourself. So, we could talk about this going back to microdosing. Like when I said for beginners, there are certain schedules and protocols that are really nice and help you get into the groove of things. But at the end of the day, after you've sort of developed a consistent regimen, usually we almost always recommend that people move to intuitive microdosing, which is literally tossing out the rule book completely. And with movement, that's really how it's progressed for me as well. And even with my breathwork practice, I've definitely done the specific sets and reps and programming for specific goals and chasing PRs and all of this stuff. But now I move for what my body needs. And oftentimes that movement is spurred on by curiosity and held in a container of playfulness. And that's really allowed my movement practice to become really nurturing for me and less about aesthetics or health goals and more about connection to myself. Now, because I'm connecting with myself through movement, I am achieving a lot of health goals out of that. It's not to say that, like, using movement and searching for a specific goal with it is bad. But I achieve those things so much more effortlessly and with love for my body and in a way that's just truly, truly nourishing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, movement should be playful. It should be fun. It should be enjoyable. It's nice to learn the rules around form at a certain point, but at a certain point, just getting curious about what your body can do, how it moves, how it feels when you move this way versus this way is far more valuable than having super strict structure around a movement.
100%. I love that idea of, doing things intuitively, especially after you've already had experience with it, whether it's breath work or microdosing or anything else, movement. You can get into a spot where you can just do it based on what your body or your mind is telling you or your intuition is telling you. There's an old Irish song. I don't know what the name of the song is, but the lyric is, I'll eat when I'm hungry and I'll drink when I'm dry. And it's basically what you're talking about, right? Like, I'll eat when I'm hungry. I'm not going to eat 3 meals because society tells me I need to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm going to eat when I'm hungry. I'll breathe when I need to pay attention to my breath. I mean, obviously with breathing, we do that all the time throughout the day. But, I'll focus on my breath work when my intuition is telling me to. I'll move when my body is saying, hey, we got to get up and move. There's something really neat about that, instead of getting so obsessive about all the rules and the structures. And there's a time and place for that. Like you said, especially when you're beginning a new practice, it can be really important to do that in that way. But once you get past that, to just listen to your body, into your mind, into your soul, that's where you can really tap into some cool stuff. Cool.
Yeah, totally.
The last thing I'd love to cover is the idea of this transient lifestyle that we've talked about in and out of our conversation. Before we get into that final topic, where can people learn more about you? I know you're with Microdosing Institute, but you have your own practices and your own Instagram. Where can people learn more about you and connect with you?
Yeah, so as of right now, I don't have a website. I have a new one in works. So the easiest way to stay connected with me is via Instagram. And my Instagram handle is at Brittany Lillegard, which I'm sure, you'll spell my name in the podcast header, so that should be easy to find. As of right now, I am not doing too much on my own outside of the Institute. However, I am in the process of converting a van to live in full-time with my dog Polly, and the goal is to travel around the U.S. Offering Wim Hof workshops immersed in nature to really teach people and give them the experience of learning how their breath can really deepen their connection to themselves, to nature, to other people. So I'm super looking forward to that. That project's going to be called the Breathwork Caravan. And that will all be announced on my Instagram once it's ready to rock and roll sometime this fall. So amazing. Instagram's the easiest.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for your van journey too. That sounds so fascinating. And I'm sure you're going to learn so much about yourself and about all the things that you're going to be incorporating in terms of your work. It's a unique experience, and I'm just excited for you and happy for you that you're taking that step. And on that note, in terms of that transient lifestyle that we've talked about, whether it's traveling, being independent, you've shared, different countries that you've lived in. What has that transient lifestyle done for you? Whether it's being an expat or, like I said, just choosing that independent lifestyle. What has that done for you in your life?
Yeah, gosh, it's done incredible things. So it really started, I had a pretty traditional lifestyle in Chicago. I had a big house, was married, 2-car garage. I had a really stable job. And all of those things really led to me just getting so into routine that I lost understanding how to listen to myself. And after leaving Chicago, I spent almost 2 full years backpacking and having zero agenda, more than a couple days in advance. Like, for 2 years of my life, I literally did not know what I was doing for more than a couple of days at a time. And that really, really, truly taught me how to trust that things would come together. I have so many funny stories where I thought I was going to be sleeping in random places without a hotel, or had no clue where I was going next, and somehow figured it out, in the nick of time. So really just learning how to trust, but also really learning how to listen to myself, to really be so attuned with my environment that I could tell, what this environment, this location, this situation I'm in is no longer serving me, so it's time to move on. Or this situation is unexpectedly amazing, so I'm going to allow myself to indulge in it longer. Whereas, my lifestyle before, I was doing things for the pure sake of, this is what was scheduled out. This is what I had planned. This is what I thought I needed to do, so I can't undo it anymore. So really, truly, just building this deep, deep, deep connection, intuition, and trust with my own self is really what that transient lifestyle has given me.
Yeah, I imagine it's done so much for you and helped shape who you are today. It's very easy to get into the pattern of, the lifestyle that most people live. And I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with that for somebody that chooses that, let's say, like 9-to-5 job, and they have the house and they have just that structure every day, and it's just the same thing over and over and every day. They may enjoy that. That might be the right thing for them, but you decided, like, there's more there. There's more to explore, and I'm going to go my own path. And then in doing so, you learn to love yourself and trust yourself and learn about different cultures and different, how people live in different ways. And you've used all of that and taken all of that and incorporated it into your life, into your practice. And that's just awesome. I think that's such a cool thing, because a lot of people don't have that courage to step outside of that comfort zone and, choose discomfort. And that's a big piece of what we do with breathwork and Wim Hof and cold exposure, or even plant medicine, to an extent of, stepping outside of that comfort zone and going deeper. It's like what Wim always says, like, go deep within. And when you do that, you learn who you are and what you want out of life and what you want to give to this world. And you're doing that. So, Brittany, thank you. This has been an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed it. As I mentioned earlier, we have so much in common, and I'm just really happy we've met and our paths have crossed. And I'm just excited to see where you're going to go and where we go together in this space, whether it's through the Wim Hof or any of the other things that we've talked about. I'm just really excited. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the space to share my voice. And I really appreciate the connection that we've built. And likewise, I really look forward to seeing where things continue to go.
For sure. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Brittany. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.